Awesome.
All right, so for today's agenda, kind of the topics that we're going to talk about, we want it to be very interactive. So as we're having the presentation, please feel free to stop Josh or I and ask your questions or put them in the chat box and we'll get to them throughout the presentation. But we really want to make sure that we're answering the questions that you've had, especially as you're having conversations with students. But today we're going to talk about to go or not to go. So as we're talking with students about grad school and if that's the right fit and career move for them, and then if it is, how do we even go about selecting a program? So what are the resources and the questions that we can start asking them and really engaging in to determine what would be some good programs and a good fit for those students? And then as they've narrowed down some potential programs, let's talk about timeline. So wherever they're at in the process, whether they're just starting to engage in graduate school decision making, or maybe they're a little bit further along, we want to provide some really good assistance to all of you and kind of wherever they're at in that process and what are some key materials and pieces that typically go into the grad school selection. Also talking about key partnerships. So all of us are from different offices and have different backgrounds. And so let's talk about who are the people in our corner and who can we rely on, because we can't be experts in all things. And so really talking about who can we rely on to help us with these conversations. And then we're going to break out into a small little case study so that we can practice and discuss, how can we go about handling some of these questions that you might have experienced in the past or as you anticipate in the future. And then obviously leaving a space for Q&A if we haven't answered any questions during our presentation.
Awesome. And as Kelly said, right, we know we have an incredible group of professionals in the room. We really want to take a minute and just kind of see what's your perspective, kind of what's your comfort, is this an everyday thing, a lot of those types of questions. So I'm going to launch the first poll. This question is all about frequency of these conversations that you might be having in your respective offices. So we'll take about 30 seconds. If you could answer the poll that's on your screen, we're really curious to see that. All right, maybe another 10 seconds or so if you haven't answered that. Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing. I think this is really, really helpful for Kelly and I to know, right? This is a really key conversation and probably a really big reason why a lot of you are in the room today. No one responded, never, right? So all of you at some point have had these conversations, whether it's just kind of a special case every semester, every year, or if this is just a really integral part of your everyday. So we're glad it's very relevant. Hopefully you'll walk away here with some great things today. The next question is a little bit more, let's go out of that one. The next question is a little bit more just about comfortability, right? So a lot of us have a lot of these conversations all the time. Just kind of curious to know, how comfortable is it for you? How much ease does it feel when you have these conversations? All right, maybe another 5 seconds if you haven't answered this question. Awesome. Well, this is great. Yeah, it seems like we have some rock stars in the room as far as this conversation goes. So generally, a lot of confidence in the room. I think that's awesome. Hopefully today will be a time where, especially for the case study and some kind of more Q&A, where we can kind of get a little bit more into it and really kind of glean a lot of information from each other. So thank you all for sharing. We're going to jump into our first aspect of all this. So there we go. But a big question that we hear all the time as far as grad school decisions is really even from the start, right? To go or not to go with this. And it's a big question. And I think a lot of times when there is some that people feeling confident, people feeling nervous with this conversation is because it is such a big decision, right? It's going to change the career trajectory for this potential student. It's gonna really impact a lot of their next steps and a lot of their next years of their life. So I think it's an honor to be a part of that, and I think a lot of you probably feel the same way. Couple points to keep in mind when we're talking about going or not going. And we'll go a little bit deeper into these in the next slide too. But of course, it'll be really different than your undergrad experience, right? I think a lot of us have gone through certificates or grad school ourselves, and just personally knowing, right, this is going to be a very intense type of an experience that's very focused on one degree, one kind of field of study, as opposed to the undergraduate experience. And because of that, right, really depends on kind of how long these will take. There's going to be a lot of kind of commitment when it comes to your time and financial resources, right? So we say 2 to 7 years is the really typical time commitment with grad school. I'd say certificates might be kind of something a little outside of that could be a little shorter, but it's a big deal, right? So 2 to 7 years is very, very typical, depending on if it's a master's program, PhD, some sort of a combination. I know there's all these different types of programs that could look like, but big deal, a lot of years. And of course, we like to say this may shape your future career options, right? So something that we tell students a lot is a degree is not a promise for X, Y, and Z after. So same thing with grad school is that it might shape your future career options. So also just giving students a lot of awareness and understanding of what is grad school for you, what is it not, what is most likely to happen after this, and why is it a great choice for you or not, right? And to continue with that, something that I think is really helpful to keep in mind is really what's best for the student, right? So a lot of us have different connections to graduate schools, maybe even different opinions or perspectives or even biases about them. So a lot of this, when we're kind of talking about should we even go or not in the first place, is always to be as connected as possible to what you know about the student and what you know about what would be best for them. And based off of that, right, that kind of affects how you're going to guide that conversation with the student. Really, we like to start with career goals, right? So asking a lot of these types of questions, right? What is going to graduate school really do for your career goals, right? Will it help you meet those? Is it more about skills? Is it more about networking in the field, and really what would come after that? Is this a launching point to a PhD or other even bigger endeavors that you might have as a student? All those different types of questions, right? Even when we get into, do different programs affect that? So what's it like to go to LSU versus a different school? What's really going to help you the most as far as those career goals? The next part too, of course, a big question that I think Kelly and I get all the time, and probably you all do as well, is wondering, what about the time commitment, right? Can I do this right now? Is this something I should wait to do and come back to? If I do wait to go to grad school, is that something that I can trust myself with and think that I will come back to maybe in 2 years or 5 years? So that time planning, that time commitment always seems to be a big factor for students. Something that goes along with this too is I hear students talk about maturity sometimes, right? So they say, I'm not sure about grad school right now. I know I want to go to this program, but I think I need to spend a year or two and mature or have some other experiences. So time even kind of connects to what does it mean outside of just having a couple years before you go versus jumping right into it? What does that do for you besides just spend some time? And of course, cost, right? We hear this all the time as well. So what's the return on investment as far as money goes immediately and as far as opportunity goes long term? So right, how much money is it going to be to go? But not just how much is it going to be to go immediately, how much money is it maybe going to affect you while you're there, right? If you're not able to work, or if you have to do an assistantship or aren't able to make the same sort of income that you're used to making. There's a lot of other fees, right? So I think just in general, kind of really doing our best to educate students on what are those different aspects of the program besides just, oh, this is what the tuition is. But there's a lot else involved with that. And of course, depending on restrictions, intensity, like I said, is work going to be a possibility or is it going to be scaled back? I think this isn't on this slide, but something that gets into cost as well as, and even time is relationships, family planning, some of those kinds of things. So grad school is a huge decision. And it even affects a lot of people's timelines to future goals, kind of other goals that they have maybe in their near future. So to go or not to go.
And I think going off that too of what Josh said, it's so helpful just to ask lots of questions and really see where that student is coming from of kind of, what do they envision with their career? What does make the most sense for them? And so I know that's a big framework and suggestion that I have is just ask as many questions as you can to really see where they're at and just kind of peel back some of these layers to determine and assess, okay, is grad school the next best step for you? Then great, let's talk about selecting a program. And so Josh and I really wanted to focus on how can we exercise unbiased advising? And once again, that's really focusing on the student specifically and what their goals and objectives are. And so regardless of what our experience has looked like with grad school or programs that we've attended, we still want to exercise unbiased advising. So, as we have conversations maybe with colleagues, whether that's at LSU or outside of LSU, and we hear about different programs, we may have suggestions on kind of programs or what might be a good fit, but still we want to be very unbiased of really thinking about what's going to be the best for this student to really meet their career goals and what they're looking for. And so a big piece of that is truly relying on other faculty and advisors that are discipline specific to help determine those programs. So for example, students that I work with, they might ask, hey, what's a specific psychology program that I should be looking into? And I always refer back to their psychology professors and their faculty mentors and say, have you had a conversation with them yet? Because they are so valuable in that, they've gone through this process before. Whether that was at LSU or not, they also have colleagues and friends and people working in similar disciplines. So have you asked where they've gone to school or maybe some programs that they would recommend? And I know from my own personal guidance, as I was an undergrad student looking at higher ed programs, I really relied on my mentors that I had developed and just asked about, what are some higher ed programs I could look into? Or, here are some states I'm thinking about looking at or moving to potentially. Do you have any suggestions? And so really hearing from those people that you trust and all of you in this room that you're getting these questions already, students are coming to ask you. And so by no means are you expected to be an expert in every program and give specific advice, but really rely on other faculty and advisors that are discipline specific to help guide these conversations. And so as you're working with a student and really making informed decisions about how to go about selecting a program, here are some helpful questions that you can say and walk a student through. So first, establish that initial program selection criteria. So in looking at grad school programs, think about for the student, what's going to best meet their career and learning objectives. And so they really need to do a thorough self-evaluation by clearly defining, what are their needs and their expectations. Some students may be coming into this conversation with you and have had a huge kind of like thought and have been thinking about this for quite a while. So they've already determined and assessed what they're looking for in grad programs. Or you may have a student that truly has no idea what to expect with grad school. And so I'm sure you've worked with students at all varying phases of that process. And so really talk to them and start sharing these are things that you can be looking for. And these are questions that you really need to internalize and think about and talk to those mentors and people that you trust that are discipline specific to help kind of guide your conversation and think about what should I be researching and looking for different programs. And so in thinking about, what are my needs and expectations, here are some great questions that you can encourage the student to ask, whether that's you having a conversation in that moment or to take with them back as they are exploring different grad programs. And that's, what is a grad program offering academically in order to meet my career goals? Are there certain research opportunities that I'm hoping to gain, certain fellowships, certain scholarships, certain hands-on experience, the material itself, and thinking about, what are the faculty members doing? What kind of work or focus area do they have? That's a huge piece of looking at grad school programs. Thinking about what do I hope to just gain out of a program itself? Like when I finish this, what do I want to be able to say that I've gotten experience in, that I can best market myself as a professional? Looking at the program and university size, geographically, where does that look? Are they, if they're an in-state student, are they looking at in-state options? Are they open to out-of-state options? kind of working through those different stipulations. And like Josh mentioned, the financial aid and scholarship piece is a huge indicator as well that goes into these grad school programs and decision making. And so looking at, what scholarships would be available, whether you are staying in state or going out of state. And just thinking about, what other pieces might I want from a program? Do I potentially want a large cohort? Am I looking for a smaller experience? Am I looking for specific professional development opportunities or the ability to go to conferences? And some students may, like I said, not know some of these questions already, but it's at least important to help put on their radar so that as they're reaching out to specific questions to gain more information, they can at least know that these are questions and things that they should start looking for and start setting up conversations with those admissions committees to gain a really good understanding of, as I'm having these conversations, am I understanding that their values, the interests, skills, and personality are aligning with what this career and this program is going to offer? And so on the next slide, we'll continue with selecting a program and kind of some questions to think about. And so, as they've worked through those questions and really assessed what's going to meet their career needs, it's time to really start pulling together program ideas. And so with that criteria, how does it measure up? And so ideally developing a list of, 15 to 20 schools. That could seem like a lot, maybe not as many, but you want to have a nice, healthy list where students are able to just kind of set some sort of parameters of, let me look at all these programs. It doesn't mean I'm applying to all 15 to 20, but let me at least put some on my radar to potentially do more research about or reach out to those programs. And so you really want to find programs that are going to match their requirements and their criteria, and then determine from this list, which ones am I very serious about and actually want to pursue and apply to. And so, in your conversations with students, like I said, they may ask you for your own recommendations based on your own career path if you have programs that you recommend. And so, obviously engaging in that conversation, talking about your experiences, I think that's so impactful of, what were you even looking for in grad schools, or what was important to you? What was a typical grad school day looking like? And so I always like to tell students, if your program allows, look for graduate assistantships. And so a lot of times students ask, oh, what is a graduate assistantship? And so it's important to have these conversations so that they're able to conceptualize and realize these things, to ask questions in determining a program that would be a good fit. And so here we've listed also some internet resources and websites that are really good for searching for programs. So once you've sort of walked through the options of talking about your own experiences, relying on faculty and advisors across campus, now here are some other resources and specific websites that you can search by programs based on the field of study, by institution size, geographic area, specific to PhD versus master's programs. Some students may really value the ranking of a program. And so here is a ranking-based grad school list. And so kind of a couple different websites. And we have a few more listed on our website as well. And so Josh and I are happy to pass along those resources and this presentation for you to reference later on in your advising sessions. But these are just a really good few websites to start looking at.
Awesome. Now we get to talk about the timeline a little bit, and a couple disclaimers about these next couple slides. As Kelly and I were kind of preparing for this, it is really difficult to capture the timeline of every single program, right? We know that things can look really different based off of the program, based off of the timing, even the type of program students want to apply to. So while I think a lot of these points really connect with most programs, right, you might see some of these points and be like, oh, I know it might be a little different for my students. So we definitely encourage that personalization where you can kind of think, oh, if I'm advising a student for one thing versus the other, it could look a little different. These are general best practices as an overview for junior and senior year that we really focus on. So junior year generally is the best year to start beginning to research and getting ready for this. I think Kelly and I talk a lot to even freshmen and sophomore that are already talking about grad school and even taking action steps towards that. We encourage that. That's wonderful. But I think as far as very heavily investing yourself into it and putting time into it, junior year is kind of the best practice. Generally, it's best to think about that at least a year in advance. It's kind of, again, kind of a blanket statement, right? If you start thinking of law school versus medical school versus higher ed, that timeline could look a little different, but kind of just in general, we like to say 1 year, right? If you're thinking about this at least a year in advance, maybe a little bit more, you're probably doing a great job. You should be really proud of yourself. Good work. Keep up the good work, and let's think of the next steps. And this is really a time where you're going to start preparing for, registering for, doing a lot of those kind of preemptive steps, right? So for some students, that might be the GRE. For other students, that's going to be more curriculum intensive kind of tests. And sometimes this is the hardest part, is just, what are these tests? When do I take them? How do I prepare for them? Where do I park? It's kind of like a job interview, you know, like all those little details. So we like to, especially for advising students, what are the questions that we can ask that will best prepare students to be successful with this, and not have to think as much about the little details, and more about just being really successful with this part. Of course, I think this is a really key one too, is the networking piece, and Kelly talked a little bit about this as well, right? But this is a wonderful time to develop that list of people that, right, they'll be in your corner. They could be great candidates for letters of recommendation. Maybe these are mentors, people that you look up to in your program as an undergrad, or even people that you're involved with on campus. So this is a great time to do that. I also tell students to, that I meet sometimes they say, yeah, I don't know if I trust any faculty members, or I don't know if they know me. I don't know if we have that connection yet. So sophomore, junior year is also a great time, if you're not sure who those individuals could be, to identify them, right? And then say, what can I do to network with them, and really help them to see me as someone that's serious about this. So sometimes it's just identifying who those people are, so you can do the work with it. And of course, this is a great time also to think about the funding. Budgeting for a lot of people takes a lot of time, so it's definitely a great time to think about the funding sources, whether it's scholarships, savings, right? All these other different types of sources for ways to fund that experience, assistantships, fellowships. This is a great time to do that, and even do some of the networking with that, right? A lot of students, I think, for example, with LSU's higher ed program, you know, maybe they're a junior, and maybe they're a junior at LSU, and you know what I mean, they're not applying yet. But this is a great time just to get kind of a leg up, and kind of know what are some great ways that I can be successful and not come out of grad school in a lot of debt. And what I think about a lot of this too, we're covering kind of a lot of ground. I'm really excited to talk about the case studies as well. But I think really when I think about the way we advise, right, whether you're a seasoned professional that's done this for a lot of years, or if it's kind of a new thing, something that doesn't happen as often, is I think really it's about relationship, and about asking great questions. So I think there's always room for us to grow as professionals and knowing more about the field. But especially what Kelly was talking about in the last slide, is a lot of this is just asking great questions, and doing our best to get students to think and find a way for them to be intentional with it. And the timeline is no different. So senior year, of course, usually has a little bit more steps, right? There's a little bit more going on your senior year. We even broke it down by semester. So even if you have a student right now that's looking to graduate in May, what are some great things that they could be doing right now that will help them be really successful by the time they actually graduate? We see a lot of statements of purpose, personal statements. This is a great time to do that, probably for a couple reasons, right? The first being, it's a lot of times a really core element to your admission process. But the second thing too is your statement of purpose, your personal statement. This is your story, right? So for a lot of students, this is also a great way for them to craft, why do I really want to go into this program? Like, who am I? Why is grad school for me? I think it's a great way just to kind of flesh out a lot of those ideas, and build a lot of confidence, even more so than just kind of checking it off the list. It's a great way to organize yourself, and a great way to ground yourself in what's coming next. Of course, this is a great time for those letters of recommendation. This is a key component too, and I'm sure you've had plenty of stories yourselves as advisors or people connecting with students about, oh my gosh, this is due next Thursday, and I need to ask my professor about a letter of recommendation, right? And sometimes faculty are so gracious and do such great things on behalf of students. But we really like to stress, let's look at making at least a 4 or 6 week timeline as far as making that ask to that faculty member, that communicates a ton of respect and just a lot of organization on your part. So how can we look to do this at least 6 weeks before you actually need it? Really, I think that for a lot of students too, that takes a lot of the pressure off of this piece and kind of just shows a lot of intentionality. And I think faculty really appreciate that, or even those of us that also write these letters of rec. This is also a great time to actually submit the application, right? So there's so many different pieces to it. This is a great semester to actually go ahead and submit. Of course, a really key aspect of this as well is getting that transcript. So this is also another thing that we don't want to see students wait until the last minute or the deadline. We want to empower them to do as many things as they can that are within their control. This is another great example of let's get those transcripts as much in advance as we can. Of course, the last one too, more connected to funding, right? So great time to apply for funding, whether it's a scholarship, really investing in what could a fellowship or a graduate assistantship look like. Maybe they even decide to work outside of their program. This is a great time to start thinking about that funding strategy. Of course, in the second semester.
Josh, I'll add something real quick to the first.
Jump in.
So as you're helping with students as well, make sure you ask them, like, what are the dates and deadlines for these different programs that you're looking at? Because some surprised to find out that they actually have applications due that November or December of their senior year. It seems so early in comparison to when they're graduating, usually in that following fall or in May, and then starting fall. So make sure you're asking questions of, have you identified what programs you're applying to and when are those dates and deadlines, to make sure that they're meeting all of those benchmarks in preparation for those applications. And then also just in regards to taking the GRE or other standardized tests, you want to allow them to have plenty of time to get those scores back. And so that's also something else to think about. Do these programs have a hard set deadline that they need all materials by a certain day? Do they have a rolling admissions process? Is there some flexibility? And so as you're helping with those standardized tests, allow students to realize, perfect world scenario, if you knock it out of the park, you get that score that you need the first time, that's amazing, that's great. I wish I could say that I had that similar scenario, but I did not, so I ended up having to take it again. But thankfully, I'd given myself enough time that, I was able to do that and still be able to submit my applications on time. So, depending upon where the student's at in the process, just make sure, that they're able to get as much time as they can as they're preparing for different schools and deadlines, and no application looks the same. And so thinking about how can I tailorize this experience for this school? And I did receive a specific question from a member in the group asking, do we have any specific resources as they prepare for the GRE, MCAT, et cetera, that's LSU specific? And we have free resources in our Career Center library that students can check out, some of those kind of GRE prep books and all of those physical materials. Unfortunately, I don't know of any LSU specific classes that students could take, but I know that Princeton Review and other companies like that are in the Baton Rouge area where students can take in-person classes or an online class if they would like to have that sort of classroom experience as they're preparing for. But also the public library in the area also has wonderful resources where students can check out books and other resources. And then also the websites themselves, especially as we've transitioned to more virtual services, the GRE website itself has wonderful free resources that students can utilize to practice and prepare for those tests as well. So quite a few options in guiding students of how to prepare for those tests and resources, whether that's here at LSU or just in the Baton Rouge community as a whole.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly, for jumping in. Those are all great points. I know that all programs aren't created equal, right? And even those timelines. So I know for me personally, when I was looking at different programs, right, there's some that you really need to apply by November 1 or December 1 to really be a great candidate for that program, where there might be other programs that are much more into the spring. So and I think that's really interesting, even within a similar discipline that can exist, right? Some other types of fields might be might have deadlines that are much more cohesive across the board. So in jumping into that second semester, right, this is kind of a great time to wrap things up. You've done a lot of the legwork here. Hopefully you've done a lot of great things to really set yourself up well, right, as a student. this is kind of a time to kind of do some last things. So right, this is when you're going to complete and mail the FAFSA, right? Especially if that's something that you're looking to do for aid. This is a great time to do that. You're also going to verify that all those application materials are received. So this is a time when a lot of students will hear responses back about that program. This is also a time where maybe you've kind of been aware of the timeline, right? And students might be waiting to hear. This is a great time to be intentional and just to send a follow-up email, especially with those people that might be connected to admissions or that program. Of course, this is also a great time to be thankful, right? And just to really value the people that have been there along the way. So whether that's literally the people that have written your letters of recommendation or key mentors, family members, right? But who are those people that have really done a lot for you to get to this point? These are great times to really thank them and just to keep them as great connection points, even as you get ready to transition into grad school.
And also too, so in just telling you kind of the junior year versus senior year timeline, that can also change to the student. So you may be working with a senior who last minute decides, okay, I'm going to grad school. And so they lost some of that time to maybe research programs, and it's a much more condensed down timeline. And so although, you know, we can't go back in time and change any of that, try and figure out, okay, where can I meet this student right now and not add additional panic to them or, you know, almost discourage them, but focus on, okay, what can I do as an advisor to like start having these conversations and figure out here's where you're at. Now let's get you in line so that you're able to apply to those different programs. But also in thinking about that, a big piece of just this whole presentation and working with all of you is truly those partnerships. And so in thinking about we're all in this together, all of us have our different expertise and areas. And so really rely on our campus partners or even just colleagues that you've made in the past, whether that's at LSU or elsewhere, and really try and create those connections for students because this process can be very overwhelming to them. It's something new that they're going into. And so being able to strategically help them and put them in place with other people that can help them is just going to be so impactful and beneficial. And so one, obviously the LSU faculty and staff members, you know, whether that's discipline specific, you know, maybe know someone that went to a specific school that a student is looking for. So try and find ways to locate those people. Another great resource is the LSU Writing Center. So through CXC support, they have specific writing support. So I know a lot of students traditionally will come see Josh and I in their personal statement process, but also the Writing Center is a wonderful resource where they're able to get that grammatical expertise and support and helping formulate their ideas and really present themselves and the ideas that they want to showcase to the admissions committee. We also have the Student Financial Management Center housed within us in the Career Center. So this is a wonderful department and team that can also provide just those financial specific conversations for students and thinking about financing grad school or even just creating a budget and thinking about as I transition into this next phase, let me go ahead and schedule an appointment with the SFMC to have these conversations and make sure once again that this is the best time, that I'm very aware of what this is going to cost, as well as, you know, the Financial Aid Center. They can provide a great perspective as well. So utilizing them in regards to finances. Obviously, us, your friends in the Career Center, we're here to assist through all of these things too. So please refer students at any point to us. But then also just the specific schools of interest. So a lot of times in these conversations with students, I'll ask them, you know, have you reached out to the school specifically? Like they have admissions recruiters that this is their job to answer your questions and really walk through this process with you and showcase, you know, the ins and outs of the application process, but also in these grad programs, you're welcome to reach out to program directors or faculty members or people within the department, since it's a lot more specialized at the graduate and PhD level. They want to have opportunities to talk about, you know, the projects and the work that they're doing within these disciplines. So this is your time to engage in those conversations and really get a good understanding of what current work is happening. You know, what are students doing in these programs? What types of careers are they going into once they complete the program? And so I'm always a big advocate for encouraging students to reach out specifically to those schools, whether they have formalized times that prospective students can join recruitment events or maybe set up Zoom calls or phone calls, but definitely rely on those program directors and admissions recruiters from the schools themselves. And then also former students. So if you're not familiar, in LinkedIn, there's an LSU alumni network where you have access to 170,000 plus LSU alumni in their various careers and interests and paths. And so that's a great way too, where students can identify where LSU alums have gone off to do specific careers or even graduate programs. And so if they come across a student or an alumni that has either attended a specific grad program or doing a career path that is very similar to the student you're working with, I also will facilitate and help them set up ways to reach out to that alumni, whether that's through LinkedIn or if we have a mutual connection, find someone that could introduce that person, and so that they can answer those specific questions. Because by no means are we experts in all the programs and every discipline and all of that. So what are ways that I can get you in touch with those people that can answer those specific questions?
All right. And we're really excited for this. We just recognize that there's just a wealth of experience and information in this room. So we're really excited to do some case studies and just kind of get into this. I think a lot of students, right, like they might have a lot of people in their corner, a lot of people helping them through the process. You might just be one of those people that they're looking for some advice or some perspective. Some students, you might be their person, you might be their mentor, that person that they're really relying on. So I think that's an honor, and just let's just talk through some of these. So we have two case studies that we've looked at. Both have the same resulting questions. In a second here, we are going to break out into two rooms. We'll have one room that will really focus on that case study number one. That theme is kind of a little bit more connected to that student that just says, hey, I just want to go to grad school, no matter what. Don't know a lot of other details. We'll have another room that's going to focus on this case study number two. That might just be one of your top students is really looking for some fit and trying to figure out some of those pieces of their search. So Courtney, I don't know if you've been able to already separate those out. We are going to spend about, I think we've got a great amount of time still. We're going to spend about 5 to 7 minutes in our breakout room. This is a great time for y'all just to share your own perspective. Maybe even one of these scenarios reminds you of something that you've recently handled or helped a student with. So we really want to kind of hear those pieces. And then we will come back into this room. Love to hear kind of each group represent kind of what they talked about and ways that they'd advise and some of those other key points. So we're going to do that right now. Again, about 5 to 7 minutes. And then we'll come back together. We'll wrap up. We'll do some more Q&A. But we're excited for this part. So we ready, Courtney?
1 second.
Okay, awesome. And
A little bit harder than I thought.
No, you're good. You're good. Thanks so much for doing that. When we do the breakout rooms too, I'm not totally sure, honestly, if you'll see this PowerPoint slide. So I can probably jump in the rooms too and just read that if you need to see it again. So.
Do you guys want to be in a room?
Yeah, maybe you can
Sure.
split. Yeah, because then if we need, we both have access to the PowerPoint slides. So that sounds great.
All right, I think this works.
All right. Well, that went really fast. Yeah, I wasn't obviously in case study number one, but really enjoyed our time together. Kelly, did you want to say anything about or anyone in your group from number one? Does anyone want to kind of reflect on that, or even other questions that you might have asked with this kind of scenario?
Yeah, we had a great group discussion. I will allow any of my group members, if they would like to brief or talk about any elements that they really resonated with. Any feedback is appreciated.
I would just say, this is Crystal. I would just say that, like, I think the conversation is actually, it can be very organic. And so I think part of it is us paying attention to those like windows of opportunity that we may have with a student who may just kind of like drop a hint that they're confused even, or that they're like, I need to make some money. What should I do? You know? And that those are actually just really good opportunities for us to really, some of the group members were saying like their motivation, their passion, their interests, and things like that.
Yeah, and even what they believe to be true, right? As far as how to make money or how to be successful. Yeah, I think that's really great.
One thing we find helpful, and it may be different because our team kind of works in recruitment, so we have these conversations on a daily basis, but our team also just has talking points so that there's kind of information that we walk away from the conversation with. And there are specific questions that we ask to help get to the real motivations and things like that. So our team is equipped with that type of thing to help get the needed information out of the student. So we kind of give talking points on what questions to ask and what information we do want to get out of the conversation to help lead to the next step. So I always think that's helpful.
Has anyone had a conversation like this recently with a student?
So again, we have them every day. I don't want to take up the whole conversation.
You're like, I just did this 20 minutes ago.
Yes, we work on the recruitment end. So we talk to students every day, you know, and we do try to get them to be very honest, even though we are representing LSU. We represent LSU online, so we actually cover different LSU campuses. And so again, LSU may not be the best choice for everybody, and we're okay with that. We want the students to make the best decision for them. We just want to make sure that they have all the information that they need to make the best decision for them. So we, like I said, we have specific questions and things we like to walk away with from the conversation. And a lot of times we put questions back on them too. So, and we do want to know, are you looking at other schools? And we try to give them things to think about in the decision-making process. But at least making sure that they have everything they need to know about LSU to make that decision.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We probably should switch over to number two. I just want to make sure we have enough time. I would love to talk to all of you about this. I think this is really fun. But yeah, my group had some really great perspective on number two. And again, this is maybe a student that's in a different situation. Maybe they've done more of their homework. They're more prepared. Really top student, has a lot of opportunity, and something just kind of went wrong. It sounds like, so you're kind of trying to get to the bottom of that. Does anyone want to share kind of some of their perspective on this one?
I can read my notes. If you attend to the emotion, ask what happened with the mentor and the school, create a pros and cons list, find out what they value about the program, or did something else happen? Like, kind of we need more information here. If it was one day or one night of time that this experience happened, try to get a second opportunity to learn more by talking to a student who goes there, get a deeper understanding about the school, and just kind of, I guess, exploring more about their interests. Was it just that one person? If so, there might be someone else in the department they can connect with as a mentor. Find out what they value. If it was a school that wasn't ranked as highly, if there's another school that maybe is lower ranking, but it's a program or culture they'd like, have a conversation about where they want to go to get the degree they want. And also to identify like who they can connect with and trust, and how much you share and open up with someone when they have your trust or when they don't have your trust. So those kind of discussions.
And I think just really like Shannon said, like asking lots of questions, because they're obviously overwhelmed with the situation in general. And just like everything Nicole just said, is just kind of like ultimately like breaking it down piece by piece and helping them like recognize and look at each of those areas. Because sometimes it's easy to just get overwhelmed, just be like, throw your hands up in the air. And so just really breaking it down to smaller pieces for them can help identify like, what are things that are easy to address? What are some things they really need to consider? And like, don't just give up because you feel overwhelmed, which is easy to do.
Maybe one more for this one. I think someone had a great point about trust that I was like, that was really good. But yeah, someone was talking about trust and just who are all the people, right, that are in this scenario, and is that one kind of key research faculty member, is that the only person that you're going to need to have a relationship with, right? And just the importance of trust, whether it's them coming to you as a connection, as an advisor, or whether it's them coming to other people in the program. So so these are great. We tried to make these kind of broad and just this whole general time broad, instead of how to get into med school or how to advise for med school versus other programs. But hopefully these are things that really feel like they connect with you across the board with all different types of programs that you might talk to students about. And I know we have a couple more minutes left. Any just kind of general Q&A, or I know there's been a couple things in the chat, but anything else that people just want to talk about today?
Say I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Like, this was very helpful. Like just knowing, like letting them guide the conversation. I'm a fixer, so I want to like plan their lives and fix things for them, but it's not my thing to fix. And I'm also really excited to hear, I'm just gonna, let me see. I think it was Lolita, I believe that's your name. I'm really excited to hear that even though you guys are recruiting for LSU programs, it's very genuine to know that you know that like, even though you're representing this program, that it still may not be a good fit for them. So that makes me really happy to just kind of know, like, I'm sure it makes them feel like it's not a sales pitch. Like you're not just like going in for the sale, like it's still student centered. So I was also really excited to hear that.
All right. So yeah, thank you so much for the comments. And Josh and I are happy to stay around for a few minutes after. I know everyone's on a tight timeline and busy schedules. So we're happy to stay after if you have specific questions, or you can reach out at any time. But in regard to this conversation, we have to put a plug in for our Graduate and Professional Schools Fair, which is happening next Tuesday on October 20th. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we have, I believe, 80 plus or 90 plus programs of all different types and kinds and sizes, and whether that's law schools, graduate schools, etc., coming or virtually coming to campus through our platform Handshake. And so please encourage your students. They can find all of that information on Handshake, and that's how they can actually go ahead and register and schedule for one-on-one sessions with graduate programs, whether they want to have a one-on-one conversation, or the graduate programs themselves can set up 30-minute sessions where up to 50 students can come and just learn information about it. So Handshake platform is great in those two regards, if they can schedule a 10-minute one-on-one meeting, or they can just attend an info session. So please encourage your students, especially as I'm sure all of you will be having conversations with students in the next, either later today or in the days to come, about the grad school process, that this is a great event for them to learn more and ask those questions.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. We've really enjoyed, I mean, we enjoyed talking about this conversation, but I think it's been really special for Kelly and I also just to hear some of your perspectives too. So that's been really awesome. We do have an assessment just to talk about, right? This is kind of a newer program for us. We're really excited to continue to improve it. So really appreciate the feedback and that kind of thing. But other than that, I think we're done for today. So thank you all so much again. Super fun talking about this topic with y'all.